What's up, everybody? Nick Dwyer back for the 10th inning here with another edition of This Day in Sports History. In yesterday's edition, we saw Walter Johnson, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, make his major league debut in 1907 in a loss against the Detroit Tigers 3-2. We don't have any Hall of Famers making their debuts today, but we do have some MLB Hall of Fame inductions to talk about, as well as some more Olympic Games to get into. So if you're new to the channel, like what you see, hit that subscribe button. If you enjoy the video, leave a thumbs up. Now let's get into it. This Day in Sports History. We start out today in 1852, and we have America's first intercollegiate sporting event take place as the Harvard heavyweight rowing crew would defeat Yale by 2 lengths over 2 miles at Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. Obviously, this would turn into a yearly event, but it has to start somewhere. It would start in 1852. Then we move all the way up to 1921, and just under 24 hours after 8 Black Sox players were acquitted from potentially throwing the 1919 World Series, MLB Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis hands out a lifetime ban to those 8 Chicago players, despite their acquittal. So, again, they had a slight victory 24 hours earlier, and it just all went downhill after that. 2 of the big names in that would be Shoeless Joe Jackson and Buck Weaver. 2 years later, we remain in Major League Baseball, but as for a solemn occasion, in 1923, the baseball games would be canceled following the death of U.S. President Warren Harding. 5 years later, in 1928, at the Amsterdam Olympics in the 400 meters, Ray Barbuti would win in 47.8 seconds, the only individual track event won by an American at the games, and he would win 0.2 seconds ahead of Jimmy Ball. We move up 8 years to the 1936 Olympics in the Berlin Olympics, and American Jesse Owens would win the 100-meter dash with 10.3 seconds in front of Adolf Hitler in a very famous race. This would be Owens' first of 4 gold medals at the games, and American Ralph Metcalfe also would come in second at those games, so the Americans took 1 and 2. On the same day that happened, in 36, we have the hammer throw, and Karl Hein with a 56.49 meters, an Olympic record, and Erwin Blasch at 55.04 meters would make it a German 1-2 gold-silver for the hammer throws. We move up another 8 years to the 1948 Olympics, and American divers Vicki Draves, Zoanne Olsen, and Patty Elsener go 1-2-3 gold, silver, bronze in the U.S. clean sweep of the medals in the women's 3-meter springboard. And also, the men took the sweep in the 3-meter springboard with Bruce Harlan, gold, Miller Anderson, silver, and Sammy Lee, bronze. Then in swimming at 48, the U.S. would take the 4x200 freestyle relay with Wally Rees, Jimmy McLean, Wally Wolf, and Bill Smith swimming a world record 8 minutes and 46 seconds to win the gold. Now we move to track and field in 1948 at the Olympics, and the Americans would go 1 and 2 in the 200 meters at the London Olympics with Mel Patton at 21.1 seconds, defeating teammate Barney Ewell, but they would both get medals, Patton getting the gold, Ewell getting the silver. Finally in 1948, and it seems like I've just been saying this all day today, an American sweep of the medals would go in the men's shot put, as Wilbur Thompson would set an Olympic record at 17.12 meters, and he would take gold ahead of Jim Delaney, who took silver, and Jim Fuchs, who took bronze. 1 year later, we moved to 1949, and the Basketball Association of America, BAA, and the National Basketball League, NBL, would merge to form the National Basketball Association, or what we know as today, the NBA. Maurice Podoloff was elected the head of the new league, and he was the head of the BAA. 3 years later, we go to 1952, go to driving, and Alberto Ascari would clinch the Formula One World Drivers' Championship by winning the German Grand Prix to win his first of 2 straight championships and 2 overall. We stay in 1952, and the Helsinki Olympics would officially close with the standards USA in first place, 78 medals overall, 40 gold medals, Soviet Union in second, 71 medals, 22 gold, and Hungary coming in third, 42 medals, 16 gold. 3 years later in 1955, we have a world record at the 800 meters when Roger Mellon would break Rudolf Harbig's record at 1 minute 45.7 seconds. This record would stand for 7 years. We stick with the theme of world records. 1 year later in 1956, Willie Williams would set the 100-meter world record at 10.1 seconds. 4 years later, we go to the MLB and we go to 1960. The other day, we talked about a weird trade where you had two players being traded for themselves 2 times in the same season. Well, this time, for the only time in MLB history, teams would exchange managers, as Detroit would trade Jimmy Dykes for Cleveland's Joe Gordon. Now we move up 19 years to 1979. In golf, Sam Snead at 67 years, 2 months and 7 days old would set the record for the oldest player to make the cut in a major at the PGA Championship. 1 year later, we go to the 1980 Olympics and they would officially close in Moscow, Russia. And the medal count looked a little uneven because, a lot of countries decided not to participate. Soviet Union, 195 total medals, 80 gold medals. East Germany, 126, and then 47 gold medals. And in third place, Bulgaria with 41 overall medals, 8 gold medals. Stay in 1980 and move to the MLB Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Al Kaline and Duke Snider would be inducted by the BBWAA, Baseball Writers of America. Then Chuck Klein and Tom Yawkey would be inducted by the Veterans Committee, all joining Cooperstown. 4 years later, we go to the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, and American Mary Lou Retton would score a 10 for the final vault in the individual all-around competition, becoming the first American woman to win an Olympic gymnastics medal, and she would win by .05 points at 79.175. We stay in 84 at the Olympics, and Australian swimmer John Seaman would win the 200-meter butterfly with a world record 1 minute, 57.04 seconds, 0.36 seconds ahead of second place. Finally in 84 at the Olympics, Ernesto Canto and Raul Gonzalez would take the gold and silver medal in the 20K walk, with Canto getting an Olympic record of 1 hour, 23 minutes, 13 seconds, 7 seconds ahead of Gonzalez. 2 years later, we go back to the Hall of Fame inductions in the MLB. 1986, Willie McCovey would be voted in by the BBWAA, then Bobby Dorr and Ernie Lombardi would be inducted by the Veterans Committee. 3 years later in horse racing, 1989, Jorge Velasquez would win aboard Matty Bumpo to become only the 5th jockey in the world at that time to ride 6,000 career winners. We now move up to 1996 at the Atlanta Olympics, and 5-time Tour de France winner Miguel Indurain of Spain would win the 52.2-kilometer road time trial with 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 5 seconds to win his only Olympic medal. Then in tennis in 96, American Andre Agassi would win the men's singles tennis gold medal, defeating Sergei Bruguera 6-2, 6-3, 6-1. This would be his only Olympic medal as well. 1 year later in 1997, we move to golf now. At the Canadian Open on the women's side, Colleen Walker with a score of 14 under would win 2 strokes ahead of runner-up Lisette Newman to win her only major. 2 years later in 1999, Arsenal Football Club would complete a huge signing, snagging up big-time striker Thierry Henry for a bargain £10 million from Juventus. 1 year later, we have another transaction, this time in the NBA. In 2000, Grant Hill was traded from the Detroit Pistons to the Orlando Magic in exchange for Chucky Atkins and Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace did help the Pistons out just a little bit. 1 year later, in 2001, the 8th Athletics World Championships would open up in Edmonton, Canada. Speaking of that, Gazena Bara of Ethiopia would become the first athlete to achieve the Olympics World Championships marathon double, winning it with a time of 2 hours, 12 minutes, 42 seconds, to defeat Simon Biwa by just 0.1 second at the World Championships. 2 years later, we moved to the British Open on the women's side in 2003, and Anika Sorenstam with a score of 10 under would win 1 stroke ahead of Sairi Pak to complete the career Grand Slam and get her 6th of 10 majors. 1 year later in 2004, in Major League Baseball, Cardinals first baseman Albert Pujols would become the first player in history to hit at least 30 homers in each of his first 4 big league seasons. But also in that game, Tony Bautista would go deep twice, hitting his 199th and 200th career home runs in the same game. We go back to golf now in 2008. We start at the U.S. Senior Open, and Eduardo Romero, with a score of 6 under, would win 4 strokes ahead of runner-up Fred Funk to win his 2nd Champions Tour major title. Then at the British Open on the women's side in 2008, Jiai Shin, with a score of 18 under, would shoot a final round 66 6 under to win her first major, 3 strokes ahead of runner-up Yani Tseng. This would be her first of 2 majors. 4 years later, in 2012, we go back to the Olympics, and American Michael Phelps, with a time of 51.21 seconds, would win the 100-meter butterfly to take his all-time Olympic medal count up to a record 21. Then in the women's 200-meter backstroke, American Missy Franklin would swim a world record 2 minutes, 4.06 seconds to win and get the third of 4 gold medals at the Olympics. Stay in 2012, but move to Major League Baseball now. In the span of just about 1 hour, the Upton brothers would go deep to both record their 100th home runs in the same game in different cities. The Diamondbacks outfielder Justin Upton would go deep off of Kyle Kendrick against the Philadelphia Phillies in Philadelphia. Then older brother BJ, now Melvin Upton, would hit his in his home field of Tropicana Field off of Baltimore's Tommy Hunter. Ironically, on July 20th, they also both hit their 99th home runs on the same day. 1 year later, we go to 2013 at the Super Rugby Final, and the Gallagher Chiefs would successfully defend their title with a 27-22 victory over the ACT Brumbies. This would be their second and most recent championship. We end today's video off in 2017, and we have a world record transfer at the time. Brazilian soccer forward Neymar would transfer from FC Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain for a world record transfer fee of £222 million on a 5-year deal. So there you have it. That's what happened on this day in sports history. If I mispronounce any names, I do apologize, but I'll see everybody tomorrow for Nick Wire and the 10th inning. See ya.